monetizing digital services since 2004, boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG, where innovation meets monetization.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Van Carlson about how 831B plans can help businesses mitigate risk. Van Carlson, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. You're joining us from Idaho. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about 831B plans and how organizations can utilize them to help mitigate risk and deal with those sorts of issues. As we get started, I wanted to share Van's bio with everybody. As founder and CEO of SRA 831B, Van Carlson is an innovator developing products for a variety of industries that can take advantage of adding additional revenues while also mitigating risk. Van has an extensive background in risk management, insurance, and finance with more than 24 years in the industry. Prior to founding SRA, Van ran his own property and casualty firm for 15 years and now improves business operations for him and his clients. Again, a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining me. And anything else about yourself or your background that you'd like before we dive on into the conversation?
No, I think that's surmises it.
Well, let's dive on in. Some people will be familiar with 831B plans, but I suspect many won't be. So why don't you start by explaining what an 831B is and how it can be utilized to protect your business?
Sure. So an 831B was brought into existence under the 1986 Tax Reform Act. It's been on the books for quite a long time, and to your point, a lot of people still don't know about it. It's very similar to a 401k. I mean, 401k designed to take a deduction at the operating company level and build up retirement for employees and owners. An 831B, it does something similar, but something completely different than retirement, and that's really risk mitigation. As you know, a lot of business owners retain a lot of their own risk. Now, traditionally, we talk about tangible assets of businesses, buildings, vehicles, stuff you can actually depreciate, typically get a loan on, you can insure for. The intangible assets of a business are blue sky, reputation, contractual obligation, intellectual properties, supply chain, all that kind of a thing. Those are very valuable to a business, but very, very hard to insure, if not impossible. And that's really where the 831B can come in and build a rainy day fund up for the unknowns that you can't transfer to traditional means, and the business owner still retaining it. The big thing there is obviously the premium you set aside for those types of programs is deductible at the operating company level. And of course, as long as you provide, it's really similar to 401k, there's a lot of restrictions and regulations to it. There's contribution limits or distributions and all that kind of stuff that comes into play. But as long as you follow those rules and guidelines, you can elect under the 831B, and that entity itself doesn't pick it up as income. So now you're able to build up a rainy day fund on tax deferred dollars that in the event something was to happen that was unforeseen to your business, you have the capability of not relying on government like the PPP program or employee credit retention programs, but you're self-reliant on yourself. And that's really what we're trying to drive home today with our business owners is the ability to be self-reliant. If you pride yourself on being an entrepreneur, forward-thinking, bootstrapper, then this program's for you because, I don't know what's going to happen the next time. And maybe, who knows when COVID-19 happens again and our government, not to get too political here, but it did seem a little bit like they were shooting from the hip, unfortunately, which means being a risk management is kind of hard to understand. When I deal with companies down around the Gulf of Mexico, we make sure we have a hurricane response set aside, or in an earthquake prone area like in Salt Lake, for example. I've got clients in your area that have a response plan put together in the event of an earthquake. Unfortunately, we didn't have it. Didn't feel like it to me anyway. And if somebody can explain to me different, I'd love to hear it. But
it's a really good point. And is something I wanted to ask you about is how, organizations that had 831B plans prior to COVID, like how that might have assisted them. And I agree. I think generally speaking, I think most people on either side of the political spectrum would say it wasn't handled all that well. And Republicans might say that about the Democrats, and Democrats might say that about the Republicans. Ultimately, it wasn't handled all that well. And you look at it and you're like, well, the threat of a global pandemic is nothing new. Like we've been talking about that for a long time, and there's been outbreaks in other places. So why was it that we didn't have a plan in place?
Yeah, it's not talked about, and you're completely right. It's the government. I don't care what party you're affiliated with. You let the American people down, in my opinion. The federal government let the American people down because they didn't have a plan in place, at least that somewhat thought out other than ad hocing stuff, right? So it was shocking. But nevertheless, I can tell you this, the clients that had our 831B plans, we responded quicker to them than the PPP program did. We had a 1,300% increase. I should back up. The 831B needs to look and feel like an insurance company. And that's where we come as an administrator. No different than the 401k administers your plan. You're not in a financial business. You don't need, is it meet the ERISA rules and everything else, right? You as a business owner don't have to worry about that because you hired a 401k administrator. An 831B administrator operates the same way. So that's really where the regulations we got to come in. And that's our job to make sure our clients are compliant with the code. But yeah, we saw a substantial increase in activity, obviously, and we were able to respond much quicker than the PPP program did. And that's really what got me in this program too, John, was back in 2008, this was happening, right? Where the Great Recession, they called it. And I saw and I was running a traditional insurance company at the time, and traditional property casualty. I was an agent. I was going out to business owners. I was managing their risk. And then, of course, the financial risk business owners get discounted all the time, right? I mean, it's just, they know the accelerated depreciation, right? So they just go out and keep levering up more risk. And then unfortunately, you have an event like 08 happened, and it affected my business. I was losing really good clients. I would say pillars in the community, great business owners, contributed a lot, added a lot of value to the community. They were finding themselves being liquidated. And because they didn't have a lot of tools available to them, unlike the Fortune 500 companies that have been utilizing these types of tools for literally decades now. And that's what really drove the home for me was there's got to be a smarter, better way to run your business. And for me, these are legitimate tax codes. And yeah, they've been abused. Unfortunately, we had attorneys basically hijack the code and use it as an estate tax play back in 08, 09, 2010. And if you go back to those days, I think it was like 1.5 million, 3 million was your estate. After that, it fell into estate taxes. And they just hijacked it. And unfortunately, that was unfortunate. And there was some abuses, and we do still see going on out there. But, that's when I would love to see Congress and the IRS and professionals in our world get together and actually say, okay, guys, we don't know when the next time this is going to happen, but we can't do what we did. And let's just make this let's make this a normal business practice where business owners have the ability to set aside reserves, tax deferred, to take care of these types of issues on their own, and make it a legitimate from the standpoint of rules and regulations. And that's really where I hope we eventually get there someday. We have really good best practices in place. But yeah, there's going to be some challenges along the way. But at the same time, though, I think if you're a successful enterprise and you worry about these types of things where you can't transfer risk, and believe me, John, there is And COVID's just one part of it. It's just, we're dealing with so many things right now with the climate changes. We're seeing now in traditional insurances where you didn't have first dollar loss. If my truck was out on the road and it ran into somebody and did damage, to the physical damage and also hurt that person, my employee driving my plumbing truck, for example, I had liability insurance for that, and it was first dollar loss to the insurance company. We're seeing now where one way to offset costs a lot of times and two, risk to the insurance carrier, they're not taking on first dollar loss. You got the first $100,000 of losses. We're seeing a lot of stuff in Florida right now with the last hurricane, where even homeowners are having a very difficult time because in hurricane-prone areas, you have first dollar loss. Not only do you have a property deductible, which we're all used to, $500,000. I got water damage. I got to pay the first $500,000 to my. Down in Florida, hurricane-prone areas, insurance companies introduced co-insurances, and I'm sure people are used to co-insurances with the health insurance. Well, your deductible now, it's not just $1,000; it's 20% of whatever the value of the house was that got blown away. Now a homeowner's got to come up with $100,000, $200,000 to rebuild their house, and we're seeing that in business as well. And so, again, these are building up these tax advantage reserves that pay these types of costs. That the business, it's a difference between living and dying.
Monetizing digital services since 2004. Boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG, where innovation meets monetization.
And you've mentioned several times the difference, in terms of risk mitigation strategies for big corporations who have lots of resources and they typically have plans in place and such, and then mid-sized to small businesses. And a lot of times it is the mid-sized to smaller businesses that don't really have anything in place. They don't have perhaps the know-how, but often just the time, the energy, the resources to put into it. And they're the ones that are most vulnerable when we have a global pandemic or a global recession or name your catastrophe. They're the ones that are the most vulnerable. And so how do you see, leveraging an 831B plan useful, to start the risk mitigation strategy for every company, even if it's mid-sized down to small mom and pop type shops?
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that the other reason why a lot of clients don't know about this code is because fees were all over the board. And I think as competition comes in, as you know, fees start getting lined out more and more, and it becomes just more cost effective and to business owners. And I would say to you that we pride ourselves on that. We are a low cost provider with five-star service. And that's what we've always prided ourselves on. When I first looked at this program, I was seeing things that just to form an 831B, law firms are charging $250,000. And I'm like, what is that about? And, this was like doing a testimonial type wills and just, take out the names, put new names in and hit print. And I just thought it was ridiculous. But, that's what the market was willing to bear at the time. And I think now, going back to, 8 states were promoting you to own an 831B within their state. Now there's 34 states. And so as more and more knowledge and education comes out on this code, the more the fees come back in line. So I think to me, and I tell clients all the time, fees can't kill the deal. And so, as long as we can make something work with the business owners, I think all successful enterprises should own some kind of form of, they're self-insuring risk now. How do you want to make it more efficient? You make it more efficient by deferring the taxes and putting it into a bucket. Because why? You just have two times typically the dollar to go fight the fight. And that's a big substantial difference in the ability, again, to live or die. And, with small, to your point, and I couldn't agree more, small to middle market business owners have more at risk. When I look at Chipotle is a good example. I mean, you remember several years ago when they were in the news cycle a lot, about for like 18 months between E. coli and a couple of the issues that were going on, they kept building more locations. Now their stock might have took a hit, but they kept adding more locations. Now you take a small mom and pop Salt Lake City area that have 4 or 5 stores. They get hit with noroviruses where somebody just simply walks in and or they get E. coli or anything. What's going to happen to those people? The smaller you are, the more exposure you to have to catastrophic losses in those events. And you talk about a double whammy. Not only are you seeing your expenses going up, but now you see a compression of sales going down. And that's where are you going to do? Run to the bank and go, hey, I need to increase my line of credit. These are things that are, done unfortunately, it happens every day. We run a blog on this stuff, and it's kind of shocking. You talk about cyber today. My gosh. I mean, the risk business owners are taking, it's funny. I was at a cyber conference, like, I don't know, end of the year. And the guy said, yeah, data used to be considered to be the gold mine. Like, ooh, I got all this data of all this information now with all my clients. And then he said, now it's considered toxic because unfortunately, you have such huge exposures to cyber now at collecting all your customers' and clients' information that the responsibility falls on you for it. And you talk about, again, mid-market to small businesses, they're not nearly as robust as Target was, right, when it comes to cyber protection. And so, again, there's a lot of exposures out there that, and two, I would say this, insurance policies, the reason why they're getting, thank God they're sending them in PDFs now in electronic form, because if they weren't, you would get like the old size of the phone books used to be when they were an inch thick. Because, and I tell business owners all the time, you're not adding more pages to the PDF file is not giving you more coverage. They're outlining the exclusions, and traditional insurance companies, for better or worse, are finding themselves more and more having to write more exclusions. A good example of that is COVID-19. There's last time I looked, there was over 1,800 cases pending against the insurance companies over COVID-19 for not triggering business interruption. And I would argue that in this country, now there's some cases going on in England right now that are getting but our language is very clear. Pandemics are excluded from coverage for business interruption. And believe me, there'll be attorneys that want to fight the fight, and God bless them. But no matter what happens though out of this, they'll just tighten up that language even more to where it's, if they missed a word or what does if really mean, all that kind of fun stuff, they'll exclude it better. I mean, so the next go around, there's this, insurance companies cannot and will not, and we really don't want them to cover events like COVID-19, because why? We couldn't afford to buy the insurance to go run our business in the future because of it. It'd be so astronomically high.
Yeah. So you've done a good job of outlining the liabilities, right, that are associated with running a business in the modern world, the complexities in the modern world of work, and as we think into the future of work and this globally interconnected marketplace, everything is just so complex, and the liability component is also very complex, and it just seems to get more and more complex. So with that in mind, working with organizations, setting up 831B plans, making sure that you have risk mitigation strategies in place, all of that is very essential so that you don't get caught flat-footed. So even if you are a small to mid-sized company, it's something you should be spending time on. And an 831B plan can be one of those tools that can be utilized to help you accomplish it.
Absolutely. And, I tell business owners, you threaded the needle. You took an idea, ran with it. Now you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility not only to your family, to your business, but the people that work for you too. And I know that small and middle market business owners are tied more to their employees. They know more about their employees than big Fortune 500 companies do. And they want to treat them right. And again, an 831B allows for business owners to stay alive and truthfully, thrive. I mean, when I saw these programs in 08, 09, 2010, the people that had these programs, they thrived during that time. Why? Because they used this program for many, many years, built up reserves, and now they're able to, if the business slides into a trough, the industry they're in slides into a trough, you make your money going up the hill, right? You don't, at the top of the hill, everybody's making money. But the advantages I saw business owners that were running these programs for a number of years, that's where really, that became so like a lightning strike to me. Like this This is what big business do. They don't care about they take advantage of when the economy takes a step back. Well, what about small to middle market business owners? What could they do in their space, in their area where they live, where they have money sitting aside in reserves, and now they're in a position to capitalize. And again, we all want good times, right? But the reality of business is there's good times and bad times. And, we're going into the unknown of a recession today. And again, we deal with business owners all the time. It's like, yeah, the strategies you got to deploy today, you got to act like a big business and think like one, because you're competing with them too, by the way. You're competing with them with employees today, right? I mean, that's probably the biggest thing I hear complaining about today is, having to compete with big companies that are, when Amazon says they have no problem offering $18 for minimum wage, you got to try to compete with that. Those are challenges, not, adding to the complexities of running a business. But, so anyway, there's just strategies you got to start deploying. And I think, for the right business, for the right client, this is a great tool. And that's what this is. It's a tool. And to your point, you owe it to yourself as a business owner, the risk taker, the bootstrapper, all those things, to look into all tools that are available to you. Maybe this isn't for you, but I think you owe it to yourself to certainly look into it.
Yeah. And I get one of the things with the human psychology is sometimes kind of this put your head in the sand approach to risk, right? And so a lot of people, it's just so overwhelming to even think about everything we've been talking about. And they're just like, well, I mean, if something like that happens, I don't know what I could possibly do. And so I don't want to stress out completely. I feel so completely overwhelmed. So I'm just going to kind of ignore it and just go about doing my work and hope that everything works out. How would you respond to that kind of approach? I suspect that's one you hear a lot.
We do. And you're absolutely right. Risk is boring, right? I mean, risk is a cost center right now to most business owners, truthfully, right? I mean, it's a line item cost. It's a necessary evil doing business, all that good stuff, right? And I'm in that camp, trust me. But at the same time, to keep that's not going to work out. And I can only say this. You've taken so much risk already to do what you do, to run your own business, not to mitigate that risk now that you're over the 3-year survival period, and now things are going good, and you've been through the downs and the turns and the ups and the downs and been forced to close, and now you reopen and you survived all this. To keep doing that just seems a little insane. I mean, there's tools out there. Look into them and make sure it makes sense for you, and make sure you're following the right rules and guidelines of this program. But I think you'll sleep. The best compliment we get from our clients is that, man, I'm just glad we did your program. I just sleep easier at night knowing that that's in the back room. And man, that any professional level, a client tells you that, you can feel pretty proud of what you do. And that's certainly for us. And I mean, we've got a great young team here at SRA 31B admin, and we're focused, and we want to grow, and we want to get and I appreciate platforms such as yours, because really it's just awareness and education.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Van, this has just been a fascinating conversation, a good introduction, I think, to many on these types of plans and risk mitigation strategies and the tools that organizations can be utilizing. Before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, thank you. 831b.com is our website. We have a good marketing department. They were able to get that domain to us. So that was a great find for us. But 831b.com, really, there's educational videos there. They can reach out to us directly through our website. We work with a lot of advisors all over the country. And so a lot of advisors are representing our products around the country. We'd love to hook people up in their area as well, which we're happy to do, and just reach out to us directly. And again, it's 831b.com is the website. Again, COVID-19 happened. It's real. A lot of business owners, to your point, were putting their head in the sand. I think now that the reality is like, hey, my policy might say all risk, but what does all risk mean? And go read the fine print, right? And again, traditional insurance companies do a really good job. But a lot of things they fall down on. And we're going to see more and more potential exposures to COVID-19 type situations and Let's just be honest. Natural catastrophes are happening more often, it feels like. So, and I think it not feels like it is. The losses show that. Even when you see a loss, like $80 billion loss or something, or I think the last hurricane is going to come in around 4.6, about 50% of that still will not be insured. And so there's still, we have exposure to self-insuring risk. And again, you as a business owner don't know that until sometimes it's too late. And, if you're looking at tools like this in the future to be able to mitigate risk, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your business to at least look into it.
Well said, Van. It has just been a pleasure. I really encourage my audience to reach out and get connected, find out more about what Van can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page. And please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.